One of the best ways to show Jesus that we love him is to run the race that he has put in front of us. And I want to talk to you for a couple minutes about that this morning. A friend of mine in Africa says that they have a saying that has been turned into a spiritual truth. And she says this: every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up, and it knows it must run faster than the fastest lion or it will be killed. Every morning, a lion wakes up, and it knows it must outrun the slowest gazelle or it will starve to death. Doesn't matter whether you are a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running. And so it is with us. If we are not running the race, then we're out of the race. Hebrews 12, 1, 2, and 3. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and you faint in your minds. Now, we've spoken of this before, and we usually speak of the weight. We speak of the besetting sin, or we speak of the patience from these verses, but I want to tell you what the race is. I want to tell you what it is. I want you to remember what it is, and I'm going to let you go. Running the race is to be working on Jesus in us. That's what it is. Oh, sure, to do that, you've got to get rid of your flesh. You've got rid of besetting sin. There's a lot of things you have to get rid of. Your purpose and your destiny, they unfold before you as you run the race. To run the race, you're making Jesus in you greater than you. And that, simply put, that is running the race. People said that true love is a lot of things, but true love really is for two to become one and recognize, as we talked about even last night at the banquet, that you are not the one. The one you love is the one. Two become one, but you're not the one. The other guy's the one. And in Christianity, Jesus is the one. Jesus is the one. During a televised tribute to the Library of Congress, Dr. Daniel Boorstin, the Library of Congress at the time, brought out a little box from a small closet that once held library rarities. The label on the box said this: contents of the President's pockets on the night of April 14th, 1865. Now, for those of you who do not know, this was Abraham Lincoln's pocket. It was the fateful night that he was assassinated. As Mr. Boorstin proceeded to remove the items from the small container and he began to display them on the camera, there was a strange hush that lingered in the room, and I'm sure in every living room across the country. And he said, there are 5 things in this box. There's a handkerchief. It was embroidered, A. Lincoln. There was a country boy's penknife. There were spectacles with a case that had been repaired with string, thread, and twine, apparently by Mr. Lincoln's own hand. There was a wallet containing $5, of course, a Confederate bill. And lastly, there was an old and worn newspaper clipping. The clippings, said Dr. Boorstin, were concerned with the great deeds of Abraham Lincoln. And one of them actually reported a speech by John Bright, which says that Abraham Lincoln, and I quote, is one of the greatest men of all times, and history will denote perhaps the greatest. Now you have to remember, in 1865, President Lincoln had millions of people who hated him. He had a lot of enemies. Many were fierce and unrelenting, and one killed him. Today, most would agree with John Bright, either on one level or another, that Abraham Lincoln was a great man. Lincoln, alone with the newspaper clippings, to remind him that The cause that was set before him was worthy. No matter what anybody said, his life was not wasted. Loneliness, I think, was averted for him by this simple reminder that somebody noticed that he was doing something right and called it good. When you read his life, you recognize that he had intense moments of loneliness, but they never turned into despair. The people who were supposed to be close to him, they kind of went crazy. And the people who were far away were always picking and poking at him. And he was left alone many times. And it would have been easy being alone like that, to get lonely. It would have been easy to think nobody cared. So Abraham Lincoln, he took this newspaper clipping everywhere he went to remind himself he was a great man. When I read that, I found it a little bit odd. I wouldn't think the President of the United States would need a piece of paper to remind him of his greatness, but he did. How much more from time to time do we need to be reminded that we're good, that we're great, that God made us and considers us wonderful, and said that we were fearfully and wonderfully made. God notices you. Whether you think you're doing right or wrong, God calls you good. He pulls you to himself. He calls you to himself and says, even if you're alone, do not be lonely because I love you. I made you and I love you. John 15:12 says, this is my commandment, says the Lord, that you love one another because I have loved you. So we know that we're loved. So if the one that's supposed to love you is being a jerk, forget about it. If you wish there was somebody close enough to love you to be a jerk, forget about it. If somebody's loving you way better than they should, you might want to forget about that too, lest it take your eyes off the Lord. Love Jesus today and love one another as he has told you to do so. And remember that you are greatly loved. I appreciate you coming.
When it's all been said and done, there is just one thing that matters. Did I do my best to live for truth? Did I live my life